Date: July 18, 1996. Location: JFK Airport, New York. This Trans-World Airlines flight was preparing to depart for Rome, the capital of Italy. They were scheduled to fly from New York to Paris and then on to Rome. Trans-World Airlines, founded in 1930, played a significant role in the development of aviation. This aircraft was a Boeing 747-100, one of Boeing's most popular models. The airline had recently added the 25-year-old aircraft to its fleet, which had accumulated a total of 93,300 flight hours and completed 16,000 flights. The pilots, who had arrived from Athens before this flight, had not noticed any abnormalities with the plane. On TWA Flight 800, there were 230 people on board, including 18 crew members and 20 off-duty employees. Of the 18 crew members, 17 were American, as were 152 of the passengers. The remaining crew member was Italian, and the other passengers were of various nationalities. In the captain's seat was 58-year-old Ralph. With 40 years of flight experience, Ralph had spent 31 years with TWA and 9 years in the Air Force. Another captain, Stephen, was just as experienced as Ralph, having worked for TWA for 32 years. There were also 2 flight engineers, 63-year-old Richard and 25-year-old Oliver. Oliver had started the job just 26 days earlier. The plane had a slight delay due to an unattended bag. It took off at 8:20 p.m. Exactly 12 minutes after taking off from JFK Airport, the plane turned into a giant fireball. It disappeared from radar screens in an instant. The explosion was so massive that the front of the plane separated from the fuselage. There was a huge explosion in the sky. Rescue teams quickly set out for the scene. Helicopters could not believe their eyes as the sea surface was covered with flames. The flames had spread over a 1-kilometer area and were over 3 meters high. Navy vessels also joined the search and rescue operation, looking for any signs of life. After a 3-hour search, hundreds of rescuers could not find a single survivor. An area of 30 square kilometers was scanned, and it was confirmed that all 230 people on board had lost their lives. The FBI launched a major investigation, and within hours, hundreds of detectives and police officers were heading to the scene. They suspected that the explosion might have been a terrorist attack. They interviewed numerous eyewitnesses and boats passing through the area at the time, searching for clues of an attack, but found none. At the same time, a terrifying rumor started spreading on the internet, suggesting that the TWA plane was accidentally shot down by the American military, not terrorists. The plane had flown near an area where the Navy was conducting exercises, raising questions about a possible targeting error. However, it was later confirmed that no test firing had taken place that night. Navy divers had been working tirelessly since the accident to recover what remained of the wreckage and, most importantly, to find the black box. On the 7th day, the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder were found. The investigation began immediately. Investigators were deeply disappointed when examining the black box because the recording cut off suddenly. This meant that whatever happened during the flight, the pilots had no time to react. The only clues left were the remains of the plane. Experiments with advanced technology determined that no bomb had exploded on the plane, ruling out a terrorist act. Later investigations focused on the theory that the explosion originated from the fuel tank. But where did the spark come from? All the debris recovered from the sea was brought ashore for a thorough investigation and was pieced together like a giant puzzle. The debris field was divided into 3 zones. In one zone, parts that had detached immediately after the explosion were found. Investigators were astonished when they saw a piece from the area that had deformed due to pressure. This piece was the center fuel tank, the largest fuel tank on the plane. This deformed fuel tank caused the cockpit to separate from the fuselage after the explosion. The conclusion was that there had been no chemical explosion on the plane. While it was known that the plane had exploded mid-air, no traces of explosives were found. The center fuel tank had been emptied before the flight because the fuel loaded in the wings was sufficient for the first leg to Paris. So why did an empty fuel tank explode? Approximately 140 liters of unused fuel remained at the bottom of the fuel tank, which had evaporated due to the heat. Why had the fuel tank heated up enough to evaporate the fuel, and what ignited it? The air conditioning system had been turned on due to the hot weather on the day of the flight. The center of the air conditioning system was located directly under the fuel tank, and the air conditioning motor had been heating up more and more with each passing minute. There was no insulation between the air conditioning motor and the fuel tank, meaning the heat from the motor directly affected the fuel tank. The maximum allowable temperature for the fuel tank was 36 degrees Celsius, but when the plane reached 13,000 feet, the temperature had unfortunately reached 50 degrees Celsius. If you recall, I mentioned earlier that the plane had been delayed due to an unattended bag. If the plane hadn't been delayed, the heat from the air conditioning motors might not have heated the fuel tank as much, and this accident might not have happened. There were still many questions about this flight, but the source of the spark remained unknown. Further examination of the cockpit voice recordings revealed that there had been short-lived short circuits on the plane. According to investigators, the short-circuiting wires were very close to the fuel tank, and when they short-circuited, the resulting electrical spark ignited the fuel tank. Jet fuels do not ignite in their liquid state, but due to the evaporation caused by the heat, it caught fire. Post-accident investigations by inspectors took 4 years, and the final report recommended that the electrical systems of Boeing 747s be thoroughly checked and that insulation be installed between the center fuel tank and the air conditioning motors.